Hello everybody, welcome to Brettcast, Comic Book Talk. So, IDW has been a long-time favorite publisher of mine from the day I got my hands on a complete run of their All Hail Megatron series. From then on, any chance to get my hands on an IDW Transformers comic, I took. Now I have about half a long box full of them, along with several of the Dreamwave and very few of the original 1984 Marvel's Transformers comics. I've heard that there are several people now that are Transformer comic fans that don't like what IDW is currently doing, but I'm fine with it, and that's their opinion. So I'm going to give my thoughts on the current state of IDW, or more precisely, their Transformers comics. But that's not all I'm going to do, because I'm going to talk about mainly the Revolution. Then I'm going to talk about First Strike, and I'm going to talk about some other lesser-known IDW comics in this. First, let's look at what people consider the start of where IDW went wrong. One must look at one of their more recent series called Revolution. Now, Transformers are no stranger to doing crossovers, as there have been plenty of them over the years. First to do it was Marvel Comics back in 1987 with G.I. Joe and the Transformers. Then they did it again with New Avengers Transformers. And in 2004, the publisher Dreamwave did 6 issues of Transformers / G.I. Joe. Finally, between 2003 and 2006, the publisher Devil's Due published 4 series under G.I. Joe vs. Transformers. G.I. Joe vs. the Transformers, G.I. Joe vs. the Transformers 2, G.I. Joe vs. Transformers 3, Art of War, and G.I. Joe vs. Transformers 4, Black Horizon. I think by now you understand that G.I. Joe and Transformers crossovers are a very common thing and seem popular. So when you look at that and what Revolution does, you have to ask, why do people hate it? What does it do differently? Well, let's get into that. There are several components that go into the Revolution series. There's the Transformers, there's G.I. Joe, Rom the Space Knight, the Micronauts, and M.A.S.K, all of which have their own compelling stories, no doubt. Now, besides the Transformers books leading up to the Revolution, I didn't read any of the other tie-ins. That's pretty much where people who like the individual properties come out and say they don't like Revolution because they either don't know these other characters or don't like the idea of their favorite characters having to team up with anybody. I, for one, am glad Revolution happened, especially with what followed. Out of Revolution, several new series were launched in the aftermath of what happened. Transformers, Till All Are One, issues 5 and on show what's happening on Cybertron post-Revolution. Optimus Prime deals with what is happening on Earth post-Revolution. Other series like G.I. Joe, M.A.S.K, Mobile Armored Strike Command, Rom Space Knight, and Micronauts all continue post-Revolution as well. Transformers Lost Light was created post-Revolution but does not deal with anything that happened in the Revolution. Rather, it is a continuation of the Transformers More Than Meets the Eye series. But the direct follow-up to Revolution is a series called Revolutionaries. I can see why some people and fans of these Hasbro properties don't like what IDW is currently doing. I am not one who thinks that IDW is doing anything wrong at all. When I first saw that Optimus Prime has his own series, I was thrilled, and I still read that series today. I do think that IDW has taken Transformers from action-oriented comics and made it more narrative, but they still keep a lot of the action in it. There are some post-Revolution comics that are much more narrative, like Transformers Till All Are One, which has a good portion of Cybertronian politics. It is funny seeing how now that Starscream is supreme ruler of Cybertron like he always wanted to be, to see him dealing with the stress of being in a leadership position and not handling it as well as he should. I do see why there are people that don't like the direction that IDW is taking these properties, and you can't expect everyone to love everything all of the time. They do add stuff like same-sex relationships, which I find is perfectly alright with me. But I know that a lot of people didn't care for the Hasbro comic event known as Revolution. I did. I thought it was done just fine, but by no means is it perfect. Even First Strike is not perfect. That's what I'm going to talk about next here. But it's a marginal improvement over Revolution. So, First Strike is another bringing together of the Hasbro properties, including Transformers, G.I. Joe, Ron the Space Knight, Action Man, Micronauts, and a little bit of M.A.S.K. But a lot less of what they had in Revolution. I'm sure that was a big shock to most of you. The actual story of First Strike was pretty good and something that I thought was neat in a way. Spoiler warning for the series here. Basic story is that the bad guys, which are humans, invade Cybertron and attack the people of Cybertron. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to give the whole thing away for those who may read it. Now, before First Strike, each of the individual titles have separate tie-ins, and it's not really required to read them to understand what goes on. The one thing that this series does do is it ends the Revolutionaries series, which was really good in my opinion. I'm not disappointed or like crying about it. I guess all good things must come to an end and all that, but I just really enjoyed that. I'm glad that the Optimus Prime series does not end, but still goes on alongside First Strike and will take up after it has ended too. So, in the end, I really enjoyed First Strike. The art was really good, the story was entertaining, and I'm glad it happened. I'm also really, really excited for what follows after First Strike, that those of you who have read it will know what I'm talking about. And now I'm going to talk about some other IDW comics. Now, I've never been one to expand past what I like. It's very clear with my interest in video games. I don't go outside of genres that I like because I don't want a game that's going to make me angry and make me smash my controller. So, how does this affect comic book reading? Well, to a T of it, I read Transformers, Iron Man, the Mighty Thor, the Jane Foster Thor, and Cyborg. So I read a lot of comics with mecha or machine-type characters, with the exception of Thor. I'm also a part of a comic book collecting group on Facebook, and so I see a lot of people talking about books they've enjoyed and whatnot, and indie comics as well. So one day I'm at the comic book store, and I see other titles by IDW that sound interesting. First one was a book called The Infinite Loop, Nothing But the Truth. Now, this book was bagged and boarded, so I can't take it out and look at it. So I had to Google it and read what it was about, and it was some kind of sci-fi, time travel, Orwellian type of stuff, and it all sounded really cool, so I took a chance. I picked up the first issue. Yeah, I'm glad that I did too, because after reading the current issues that are available, it's a really gripping story. It has great artwork and great characters too. I would definitely say to all of you to pick up The Infinite Loop, Nothing But the Truth. It's such a good series so far. Now, when I was reading one of those issues of Infinite Loop, I saw on the inside back cover an advertisement for a series called Sword of Ages, which I'd never heard of. So again, I took to Google, and once the description of the book mentioned Arthurian legend, I was sold. I went to my usual comic book store and looked and couldn't find it. I even asked. They said they didn't have it. It was not till a few weeks ago that I was at another comic store a ways away from me, and I finally found it. Again, another really good book, and I'm glad I picked it up. I'm really excited to see where the series goes with its characters and story, and how long the series will remain. I don't want to see this series be done after 6 or even 12 issues. I want this to be a long-going series, like 40 or 50 or even 60 Transformers, or 60 issues, like Transformers More Than Meets the Eye did, and Robots in Disguise did. This series just deserves to stay going for as long as it can, but I want this too for Infinite Loop. That's only because it's planned. Or no, that's not going to happen though, because it's only planned for 4 issues. But it is a continuation of a 6-issue series that I need to get the trade of the original Infinite Loop series. So again, I think that IDW is doing great stuff. Making the main character in Infinite Loop a lesbian is a bold move. I find it really interesting to see how that and their undercover type of relationship will affect her character development going forward. As for Transformers, I have way too much excitement in me to see what will come next after the events of First Strike. So, IDW, keep up the good work, and I look forward to seeing what comes next. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. If you want to join the conversation, please leave a comment down below. And as always, thanks for listening. This has been Brett Cass Comic Book Talk. Goodbye.